betting insights right here on QLTV, a show where we think data can be sexy, even if it's coming from somebody who definitely is not. On tonight's show, we preview week 5 in the NFL. That, of course, means we start with our degenerate pregame show for Thursday night football between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Chicago Bears. We also look at every other game in the NFL in week 5 in a segment we call Quick Slants. And, of course, what you're here for. How am I going to win some money this week in the NFL? We give you our week 5 picks at the end of the show. Picks extremely strong through 4 weeks, 13, 7, and 2 so far on the season. So you're going to want to stick around for those. Big thank you to everybody tuning in on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, what have you, either live or on demand. Of course, if you're watching live, hit me in the comment box on whatever social platform you're watching. I can see your comments come in as the show goes along. If I find them amusing or informative, I'll put them on the screen. We'll talk about the NFL together here on a Thursday night on the GBI show. Of course, the show, as always, brought to you by BetQL. Use BetQL.co for all your NFL betting data. Over 10,000 game simulations per NFL contest. So you can use that information from those projections, apply it to the point spread, the total, wherever you want to make some money betting on the NFL. Use promo code Sanin, S-A-N-I-N, at the bottom of your screen. Save 20% at BetQL. Let's get right into it, folks. Your degenerate pregame show. Forget Terry and Howie and Jimmy and whoever. Let's talk about what matters. Let's talk about betting on Thursday Night Football. And I'm going to tell you right out front so you can go ahead and place your bets before the game starts. I am on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers -3.5 at the Chicago Bears. That is why I'm wearing my dreamsicle attire, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers throwback jersey. I think this is a Josh Freeman jersey. It didn't work out, okay, but it looks really cool, so that's all I care about. Anyway, I'm on the Bucs -3.5 at the Bears tonight on Thursday Night Football. You can pay the extra vig and lay the 3 with Tampa Bay. I don't recommend that. I think you go straight for the 3.5. Reason I believe that is in the long term, buying the half a point, not going to be worth it. You're going to lose more long term anyway on that bet just because of the extra juice you're paying than you would if you lay the 3.5. Just my opinion on that one. But anyway, Bucs -3.5 at the Bears. Total sits at 44.5. I don't have anything on the total, but I'll talk to you about why I feel Tampa Bay against the spread is the move here tonight. First of all, I think we talk about 2 good defenses here in the Bucs and the Bears. The reputation of the Bears suggests they have the superior defense. However, you look at the metrics, you look at the numbers for this game. Tampa Bay outpacing Chicago in almost every defensive metric that I care about heading into this contest. According to Football Outsiders rankings, just looking at the defenses, Tampa Bay #1 in the league so far this season compared to a Chicago team that's about 7th on defense according to Football Outsiders rankings. Tampa Bay, excellent yards per play defense. Chicago, again, behind them in that regard. And you look at these 2 defenses specifically, the quality of competition that they've played, a factor that favors the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Had a rough game last week against the Los Angeles Chargers. Of course, weren't 100% sure who they were going to see at quarterback for a lot of last week. And there just isn't a lot of game tape out on Justin Herbert. We have an interesting stat on Herbert, by the way, that I will get you in quick slants later in the show. But they played a productive offense so far this season in the Carolina Panthers. They had a tough road game Mile High. Their defense managed to stand tall in that game as well. You compare that to what the Bears have faced so far this season. They played the Lions. They played a struggling Falcons team. They faced arguably the worst offense in the league in the New York Giants. And you think Tampa Bay there has played tougher opponents on the defensive side of the ball so far. This bears out in strength of schedule as well. Tampa Bay with an edge in terms of the quality of opponents they faced overall so far this season. Let's look at these teams a little closer. We'll start with the Chicago Bears. 2-2 against the spread so far this season, and it's been a pretty clear delineation as far as where they've had success against the spread and where they haven't. The 2 teams they have lost to against the spread, the Indianapolis Colts and the New York Giants, respectively, 1st in the league and 6th in the league in yards per play allowed this year. The two wins they've had against the spread, Detroit and Atlanta, 26th in the league and 30th in the league in yards per play allowed so far this season. What does that tell us? So far this year, the Chicago Bears have not covered against teams with solid defenses. They have covered against teams with porous defenses. That lines up logically. That makes a lot of sense. Where does Tampa Bay fit into this equation? As I mentioned, number one in the league defensively, according to Football Outsiders' defensive rankings, fourth in the league in yards per play allowed so far this year. So the metrics tell us, according to what we've seen so far this season, Chicago may have some trouble both on the field and against the spread against this Tampa Bay team. Let's take a quick look at the quarterbacks in this game, folks. And of course, Tampa Bay, that now means Tom Brady. Tom Brady, Thursday Night Football in his career, 12-2 straight up in his career. Of course, those all came with an amazing culture, an amazing organization in the New England Patriots. Not the case anymore, but things looking good so far in Tampa Bay. Tom Brady also with a higher completion rate, higher yards per attempt by a pretty convincing margin in both accounts on Thursday night compared to Sunday and Monday games. Of course, larger sample sizes, especially on Sundays, but he's been very successful historically on Thursday Night Football. Let's compare that now. Nick Foles. This season, Nick Foles, he was supposed to be the savior to save the Chicago Bears from Mitchell Trubisky. He finally had the chance when Trubisky went down injured. Hasn't worked out so far. Of course, he's only played in a couple of games, but so far he is 30th in the league in yards per pass attempt this season. Only 3 quarterbacks are worse so far this year. Those 3 quarterbacks, you could probably guess at least 2 of them, Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold, but Carson Wentz on that list as well. So, again, not impressed with Nick Foles as through the NFL weaves. These 2 quarterbacks face in a off-kilter rematch of their Super Bowl 52 tilt, as the big red hype guy says he has the Bears plus 3.5. He also says that Joe Burrow owns. Interesting fact, we talk about Nick Foles being 30th in the league in yards per attempt. Above him by just 1 spot at number 29 is still Joe Burrow. We'll talk a little bit more about him later in the show. But back to our degenerate pregame show here. Thank you for checking in, big red hype guy. This is a tricky line. I get it. 3.5. Not a sexy line if you want to lay the points with Tampa Bay. But let me tell you a quick additional factor that I like as it pertains to this game. You think about Chicago on a Thursday night, even in the fall. You're thinking, it's probably going to be pretty chilly. That could affect the way the offenses perform. Forecast, 57 degrees and clear in Chicago. Even if the wind does whip up, you're not dealing with a bitter cold night. And Tampa Bay now with a quarterback, as opposed to a Jameis Winston, who played all of his collegiate career and every snap basically he's played as a professional down south, Tom Brady's used to the cold anyway. So that weather advantage, not existent here tonight. And even if it was, Tom Brady's certainly used to throwing in those conditions. Injury concerns, the one problem I think for the Bucs tonight, Chris Godwin out due to injury, very impactful wide receiver for that Bucs team. Leonard Fournette, he's doubtful. LaShawn McCoy, he's out. A couple other names questionable on the injury report, but we are expecting Mike Evans for the game, at least at last check before our pre-production meetings here on the GBI show. So yes, some issues on the injury front, but again, not enough, I think, to take me off of Tampa Bay minus 3.5 in this game over the Chicago Bears. So that's your degenerate pregame show for Thursday Night Football. Very excited about this game. I mean, 2 teams with winning records so far this year, both 3-1 on the season. But again, very different 3-1 records. Tampa Bay getting their wins by going to Denver, by beating 2 solid offenses so far this season in the Chargers and the Panthers. Whereas Chicago, they could very well be a 1-3 team, or worse, they could very well be 0-4 against the spread. They needed 2 miracle comebacks to cover against the Lions and the Falcons. No home field advantage in terms of crowd noise production. Going to hurt the Bears here as well. Again, Tampa minus 3.5 is the bet. So hurry up. You got 10 minutes if you're watching live. Go put your bets in wherever you may do so in the regulated sports betting space. So we'll move on to our BetQL game of the week. And this week, it's Sunday Night Football. And it's a good one, I think. Minnesota Vikings, 7-point dogs at the Seattle Seahawks. Total extremely high because as we've seen for these first 4 weeks, overs have been in vogue. Total 57.5 for this game. Opened at Seattle -9, by the way. It's come down by 2 points. And the reason for that, primarily a porous defense for Seattle. How much separation can the Seahawks really put between them and a decent team in the Vikings? Of course, the Vikings getting their first win of the season last week in Houston, which prompted the firing of Bill O'Brien down there in Houston. Despite their 1-3 record, Minnesota not bad this season. Both of these offenses in the top 5 in the league in terms of yards per play, both defenses in the bottom 8 in terms of yards per play allowed. So stands to reason we're going to see the ball move a lot on both sides. We're going to see both defenses continue to struggle to get stops this season. Both of these teams, by the way, playing some pretty impressive competition so far this year. Of course, the Vikings having to make that trip down to Houston. At home, they've played Tennessee. They played Green Bay to start the season. And then, of course, they played at Indianapolis as well. All of those teams, except for Houston, very impressive early on in this campaign. Of course, the Seahawks beating the Cowboys and their high-powered offense. We'll talk about them later in the show. They, of course, beat the New England Patriots on the 1-yard line on Sunday Night Football a couple of weeks back. So certainly two teams that have been battle-tested, and I think we get a tight game here. I actually do have a play on the BetQL game of the week this week, and it is on the Vikings +7. Tell you this. Sports betting in general is a battle of perception versus reality. I say it all the time. The lines that are set, a lot of data involved, but you have to fight against your perception and rely on what numbers and data are happening in front of your eyes. In the terms of the Minnesota Vikings quarterback situation so far this season, you would think, and the public perception thinks, Russell Wilson is a way better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. And in many ways, that is true. A more mobile quarterback is Wilson, and he certainly has more of a big play ability. But you look at the numbers for these two quarterbacks so far this season, and their statistical output, at least in terms of per play, very similar. Russell Wilson, number 1 in the league in yards per pass attempt, 9.4 yards on average when he puts the ball in the air. Kirk Cousins is 3rd in the league in that regard at 8.8 yards on average when he puts the ball in the air. You would not think that these two quarterbacks are anywhere near each other in that regard, and yet here we are. Some injury concerns still for the Seahawks. Jordan Brooks, Jamal Adams still out with injuries. Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde, both on the injury report for the Seahawks still. Shaquille Griffin, also on the injury report in the defensive backfield for the Seahawks. And of course, going against a Vikings team that can move the ball through the air, you're going to need all the help you can get in that defensive backfield. I think at the end of the day, you look at a game where the ticket count and the money count a little mismatched. And I think that tells you that, again, bigger money coming in on the Vikings than the Seahawks. Take that for what you will, of course. But according to BetQL, 56% of the money on the Vikings, despite 54% of the tickets being on the Seahawks. Again, tells you more than half the betting universe on Seattle, but more than half that money on the Vikings. And again, perception versus reality. A 4-0 team in the Seahawks, only laying a touchdown at home against a Vikings team that, I mean, we were talking about firing Mike Zimmer just a couple of weeks ago. I think the Vikings keep this game very close, very competitive to the end. It's going to be a lot of points on both sides. Give me the Vikings +7. So we've already made 2 picks here tonight. Tampa Bay -3.5 for Thursday Night Football over the Bears. And on Sunday Night Football, Vikings +7 at the Seahawks. We will recap those and the rest of my picks at the end of the show as we run through the rest of Week 5. So that was the BetQL game of the week. Of course, it is brought to you by BetQL. Over 10,000 simulations of every NFL game. that provides you with projections using massive sample sizes of data that you can then apply to the point spreads and totals. For example, BetQL sees through their projections this game being decided by an average of 6.5 points. The Vikings, a 7-point underdog, slight value on the Vikings by virtue of that. If you want to see that for every game, you subscribe at BetQL. You can do it for a week. You can do it for a year. You can do it for anything in between. Use promo code SANIN, S-A-N-I-N, for 20% off all subscriptions. Now it's time for me to take a really deep breath because it's time for Quick Slants. And Quick Slants is like a mountain of football cocaine where we just breathe it in and all of a sudden everything's moving really quickly. We preview every game on the NFL schedule and we are going to start it right now. Quick Slants time, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start 1 o'clock games on Sunday. Raiders, 12-point dogs at the Chiefs, total 55. This opened at KC minus 11.5. And I am scared of this game only because the Chiefs just played the Patriots, who are currently going through some COVID-19 issues. We saw the pictures. Stephon Gilmore, very close to Patrick Mahomes, who is, of course, the golden boy of the NFL. Stephon Gilmore, after that game, testing positive for COVID-19. Cam Newton, he still might be out. We'll talk about him later in the show, but that's kind of where it started for the Patriots. It moved on to Stephon Gilmore. We don't know what the situation is with the Chiefs right now. Now, statistically, Vegas tied for 26th in the league in terms of yards per play allowed. Porous defense. We saw them get lit up for 30 against the Buffalo Bills last week. Of course, that doesn't bode well against a Chiefs team that has historically, over the last couple of years, put up a lot of points against the Vegas Raiders. Vegas, they were then Oakland, giving up 35 points in 3 of the last 4 meetings between these two teams, dating back to 2018. Again, no play for me because of my COVID-related concerns, but there is the potential for a blowout here as KC plays at home, assuming they stay healthy. Next up, quick slants. Cardinals, 7-point favorites at the Jets, total of 47. Now, this opened up Arizona minus 8.5. Got to consider the travel here when you're talking about the Cardinals. They just played an East Coast game against Carolina. They're playing another East Coast game here against the Jets. We do not know for sure if they had to travel back to Arizona because of the league's COVID protocol before going to East Rutherford to play the Jets this weekend. We saw that situation impact the Los Angeles Rams a couple of weeks ago as they looked very sluggish in the first half after going to Philly, having to go back to LA, and then going to Buffalo to play the Bills. They almost came back in the second half, but again, they cost themselves in a big way in the first 30 minutes of that game. If the Cardinals do have to go east to west and back to east, how does that travel impact them? Other side, Sam Darnold set to miss this game for the Jets. That means we get Joe Flacco, and that means we get a return of the most tired bit in all of sports and sports media, the Is Joe Flacco elite jokes on social media. Well, spoiler alert, he's not, but I don't trust the Cardinals in this spot. Given the travel situation, I will lay off of this game. Eagles, 7-point underdogs at the Pittsburgh Steelers, the battle for Pennsylvania, total 44.5. Game opened at 7. It has stayed at 7. I will go to the total here, and I will play the under. Eagles tied with the Jets for the worst offense in the league in terms of yards per play. Pittsburgh, excellent defensively. Second in the league in yards per play allowed, allowing less than 5 yards a pop to their opponents. Both defenses pretty strong. We saw the Eagles play extremely well defensively last week on Sunday Night Football against the Niners and their backup quarterback unit. I think the under is the look here. I have not liked anything about either of these offenses, especially when you consider how many winless teams that the Pittsburgh Steelers got to play in the first 3 weeks of the season. I think that's a big factor here, even if they're coming off of an impromptu bye week by having their game against the Titans last week moved due to COVID-19. Next up, Jaguars, 5.5-point underdogs at the Texans, total 54. This opened at 6.5. I took it on Tuesday's show at -6. So in the interest of transparency, that is where we'll keep it. I am on the Texans -6. Again, the emotional spot here for the Texans cannot be understated. Bill O'Brien no longer the head coach, and that bodes well for this team long term, as he is now not ruining the team both with in-game decisions, but the personnel decisions as well. I think you're going to see this Texans team come out rejuvenated at home against, by the way, the worst defense that they've played all season. Jaguars, the worst defense in the league, according to Football Outsiders, through 4 weeks this season. We saw them give up a lot of yards and a lot of points to Joe Burrow and the Bengals last week, which I think tells you at this point all you need to know about that Jaguars defense. I think Houston comes out in this game, rejuvenated and feeling free on the offensive end. I think they're going to really let it out, all those frustrations from the first 4 weeks against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll move to the AFC North next here in quick slants in the form of a game between the Bengals and Ravens. Cincinnati, 13-point underdogs, total at 51 in this battle between the Bengals and Ravens. This is the kind of game, we said it last week when they played the Washington football team. This is the kind of game the Ravens usually dominate. A bad team at home, they usually destroy teams in this spot, and then they fail against higher quality opponents. That's kind of been the pattern with the Lamar Jackson-led Ravens. Well, this is a great opportunity for that because they're playing one of the worst teams in the league in the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati played great offensively last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And a lot of people now doing victory laps. Okay, Joe Burrow is good now. He's now the clear favorite to win Rookie of the Year, as we mentioned on Tuesday. Here's the problem. As we just said, Jacksonville, arguably the worst defense in the NFL so far this season. So Joe Burrow and that offense playing well really doesn't mean a lot. It doesn't translate to this game against the Ravens. I don't think Burrow passes this test, but I'm not going to lay close to 2 touchdowns in order to find out. Next up, we'll head south, the NFC South to be exact. Carolina Panthers, 1-point dogs at the Atlanta Falcons, total 54.5. And you notice a lot of high totals this week as the markets adjust to all the points we've been seeing in the NFL. Falcons open 3.5-point favorites here, so a 2.5-point drop in the line. Falcons now 1-point fave. Panthers rounding into form over these last couple of weeks. They struggled defensively, especially in weeks 1 and 2 against Tampa Bay and Vegas. But against the Chargers and Justin Herbert, they did a nice job on the road defensively, got a win there. And then, of course, they did an excellent job against Kyler Murray and the Cardinals on both sides of the ball last week to move themselves into a decent place here in the NFC South. They're only a game back of the lead. Atlanta, all kinds of disarray, of course. They haven't put together a 60-minute game on either side of the ball. I don't anticipate them doing it here, but with everything pointing in the direction of the Panthers, you still have a desperate Falcons team at home. Dan Quinn coaching for his job very clearly at this point after the start that they've had. I don't like either side enough to justify a play here. Now, we talked before about the LA Rams and their crazy travel situation. It doesn't get any better this week. They were just in LA after coming from Buffalo the week before. Now they go all the way back to the East. They take on the Washington football team. Rams, 7.5-point favorites in this game, 45 points on the total. Not a lot of faith from bettors in the Rams right now as this opened at a 9.5-point spread. And I think a big reason for that, the defense of the Washington football team, ranked 4th in Football Outsiders rankings on defense, 7th in the league in yards per play allowed. And you look at the Rams outside of that second half against the Bills where they put together that furious comeback that fell just short, and outside of their game against the Philadelphia Eagles, who almost everybody is doing well against this season, they have looked rough defensively. Looking back, only scoring 20 points at home against that Dallas defense, that's embarrassing with how badly that Cowboys team has played on the defensive side of the ball. I would lean toward the Washington football team in this game. Almost just called them by their old name. I apologize. But Kyle Allen making his first start for Washington after Dwayne Haskins has been benched by the team. Listen, Kyle Allen was awful at the end of last year for Carolina. I don't anticipate that changing as he tries to learn a new offense here in Washington. So it's going to be a pass for me. Now, game off the board right now, Bills and Tennessee. There is talk that this game could be played on Tuesday. I have a couple of thoughts on this game. First of all, receiving core for the Titans is the most impacted unit in terms of this COVID-19 outbreak that they have been experiencing. That's a problem in the passing game for Ryan Tannehill. Against a team like the Bills, who play decent defensively, you can't afford to have large chunks of a position unit out. I would rate the Bills anywhere up to a field goal in this game as a favorite. I would probably take them only because of all the uncertainty with the Titans so far here this season. But again, we don't know for sure if this game is going to be played. We don't have a definitive line one way or the other, so we'll see. Dolphins +9 taking on the Niners in Santa Clara, total 49.5. My question to you folks is, should this version of the Niners be favored by this many points against anybody but the Giants or Jets? We still don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be playing for the Niners. He did practice today for at least bits and pieces, which is a good sign, but we don't know for sure if he is going to see action for the Niners this week. If he doesn't, I think there's definitely some value in the +9 points for Miami. They've looked competent, Miami. They haven't been great, but again, they gave Seattle a game until late in the fourth quarter. I think they are certainly capable of doing the same on the road if it does end up being Mullins or Beathard for the 49ers at quarterback. If it's Garoppolo, that all changes. And with us not knowing for sure, we're going to sit this one out. Next up, Colts Browns. Colts 1-point dogs. Opened at 2.5. Total 46. Browns possibly overvalued this week after the way they played offensively against the Cowboys. 1 point short of a 50-burger in Jerry World last week. But the Colts, number one in the league, allowing just 4.4 yards per play to their opponents. They have an excellent defense. They block well up front, which has been doing wonders for Phillip Rivers. Rivers, by the way, this season, limiting the turnovers, just 3 picks through 4 weeks. We said preseason that was going to be the big concern for this offense. And so far, Rivers has done an excellent job. Because of those contributing factors and some key injuries, Kareem Hunt on the injury report, Odell Beckham on the injury report for the Browns, give me the Colts -1 on the road against the Cleveland Browns in this spot. I do think they get it done again, and I think we have an excellent race shaping up at the top of the AFC South between the Titans and the Colts, of course, assuming that the Titans stop holding illicit workouts and finish the season. We'll see what happens. NFC East battle, we just talked about them. They almost gave up a 50-burger last week to the Browns at home. It is the Dallas Cowboys hosting the Giants. 9.5 points, the line between these two teams. Of course, Dallas favored. Total 54. This line has been dropping quite a bit. 11.5 was the open. And the reason for that is we don't know if Dallas can stop anybody. Now, it's very easy to stop Daniel Jones and the Giants, but for this Dallas team, I don't know that for sure, if I'm being completely honest. Giants, bad offensively, good defensively. Dallas, good offensively, bad defensively. We have strengths matching up with weaknesses on both sides of the ball. The way the points have dropped, it would suggest taking the points, but again, I'm not putting any sort of faith into Daniel Jones and the Giants offense in any capacity until they prove to me that they can move the ball with some sort of effectiveness. Now, another game off the board, at least for now. Broncos, Patriots. Cam Newton, unlikely to play no matter when this game happens, assuming it happens this week because of COVID-19. Same for Stephon Gilmore. Broncos, we were seeing some 11-point spreads and things like that before the game was taken off the board. If that stays, I think that's a good idea. Can't make a play on it with it off the board. Probably stay away from it anyway, not knowing just how deep the COVID situation runs right now for the Patriots. Finally, on quick slants, we look at Monday Night Football. Chargers, 7.5-point underdogs at the Saints, total 51. Spread has stayed at 7.5 from the open. Justin Herbert confirmed the starter earlier today after Coach Anthony Lynn said Tyrod Taylor was heading to the bench. Herbert, by the way, 6th in the league in yards per attempt so far. He has done an excellent job in really weird circumstances. He was expected to sit for a while and learn from Tyrod Taylor. Instead, team doctors puncture Tyrod Taylor's lung, and it's up to Herbert to fill in the gaps. He's done an amazing job so far. By the way, you see the difference in yards per attempt between Herbert and Joe Burrow. One's near the top of the league, one's near the bottom, and yet the Rookie of the Year love all going towards Burrow so far this season for some reason that I vehemently disagree with at this point. Rookie quarterback, Monday Night Football against a team that historically does well at home, but I don't know that I'd lay a touchdown with this Saints team right now at all. Yes, they did well against the Lions last week, but Drew Brees still not driving the ball down the field against a pretty potent offense right now. In the Chargers, I will stay away from Monday Night Football. So that's quick slants. Whew. We all exhale, wipe the sweat from our brows as we preview every game on the NFL schedule this weekend here on the GBI show. Now, I know why you're here. You're here to make money betting on the NFL. And you want to know what picks I have this week, because so far they've gone very well. Let's look back. Last week we went 2-2-1 for the season, 13-7-2. For those of you scoring at home, 65% so far on the season. Of course, it's all done right here live. There's archived video. There's no smoke and mirrors, no parlor tricks to boost the record. What you see on the show is what you get in the recaps. And so far, we are doing very well. Can we keep that going? Well, let's hope this week's group of 5 picks helps us get there. To recap, this week we have the Texans -6 over the Jaguars. We picked that one on Tuesday. You can get a better number now at 5.5, depending on where you look. Buccaneers tonight. Game's already started. I hope it's going well. I'll find out after the show. Laying 3.5 at the Bears on Thursday Night Football. Vikings +7 over the Seahawks on Sunday Night Football. Eagles Steelers under 44.5. And the Colts -1 in Cleveland against the Browns. So those are your week 5 picks here on the GBI show. If you take them, I hope they work out for us. If not, sorry. We'll see what happens. Of course, good luck on your bets until we meet again on Tuesday. On Tuesday, we'll look back at week 5 and start getting you ready for week 6 in the National Football League. Until then, enjoy the rest of the NBA Finals. Enjoy the French Open conclusion over these next few days. And of course, enjoy the college and pro football. We'll see you next